Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today's video, we're going to be covering my 1990 GT Aggressor build, the parts that I used, and some of the background on it. Now, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and like so you don't miss any new content. And also, if you're new to the Aggressors, I'll leave a link to the video I made about their complete history. It's pretty interesting, so check that out. So a little background here, I started getting into the Aggressors a few years ago, and I've been working on this concept for about a year. I'm also entering this build in the BMX Museum 2025 calendar build-off in the freestyle category. So if you're on there, I'd appreciate your support if you could vote for this build. That would be great. I also want to thank C4 Labs, Ernie's 80s, and Angelo for their support on part restoration, chrome plating, and powder coating. So enough blah, blah, blah. Let's get started. Starting out with the wheels, I used Haro Lineage chrome-plated 36-spoke wheels, in which I removed the Peregrine-style hubs and sold them. Then I had Generation 1 polished Superlace hubs laced up to those hoops. These are just stunning. I really like the way this came out, and all of the lacing and truing was done by C4 Labs. Alright, genuine GT tubes. No, I'm just kidding. But Morbid Thrasher hooked me up with Redline Air, so I filled my tubes up with that. The GT LP5 tires, of course, in black, 20 by 1.75 for those who care, and Trick Tops clear dice caps. Now, I might change the caps later, but for right now, I think these look pretty cool. Frame set was purchased without the C-post and was spray bombed. This was perfect for my rule set, which I don't like to mess with survivors unless they're too far gone. There are two schools of thought on this. One, it's only original once, don't mess with it. And the other is, who cares? It's your bike, you do what you want. Since this Aggressor was far beyond saving with just soap and water, it was the perfect candidate for a fresh canvas. C4 Labs did the frame and powder coated it in electric red. I wanted this color to match the 1991 Aggressor neon red, and honestly, when I got it, this is more of a Dayglow orange and Dayglow pink combination than it is electric red. But the color has grown on me, and I kind of like it now. Decals. So I started out with Perfect decals. And there's a little bit of drama going on with Perfect decals. Apparently that company has dissolved, but that's for another video. And I started out with those, and there was some bleed through of the white letters where the Dayglow color was coming through the actual stickers. So I had to switch them over to BMX products. Now, I highly recommend BMX products. I've used them on other builds, as well as a Diamondback Cool Streak build and a video I did. So I'll leave a link to that in case you haven't seen it. So the gyro. I was on the fence about this, either using a black gyro or a chrome-plated gyro. Wasn't sure which way to go, so I asked for some opinions, and I got a consensus and leaned back towards the black gyro. So that's what I chose. This one was meticulously restored by Ernie's 80s, and it came out really nice. So if you're considering him, I highly recommend him. I've had a few transactions, and they've all been very smooth. So the bash guard is original and aluminum from 1990, but it was in really rough shape when I got it. After some weld repair and sanding it, it was ready for powder coat, and that was done in black by Angelo. It came out really nice, and I finally attached some polished stainless steel hardware to secure it. Really happy the way this turned out. GT Pro Freestyle Tour dual cable guide fork was re-chromed by New England Chrome Plating. It had to be done twice though because there were imperfections in the finish on the first go-around. This is not uncommon, so be aware if you're contemplating getting something re-chromed or just chrome-plated. The second time was a trick, and it is show-worthy. Now, to make everything more complicated, there are actually 3 to 4 different forks for the 1990 Aggressor, depending on how you wish to argue what constitutes a style or design change. Style 1 is what we all have known as the 1987 through 1989 Pro Freestyle Tour forks, with dual internal cable guides and of course the slanted bottom tubes. Style 2 is 1988 to 1989 Performer style forks, 4130 chromoly, but with flat bottom tubes. Style 3 is 1990 forks with the updated dropouts and new logos with a single brazed on external cable guide. Then there was a Style 4, which is basically 1987 to 1989 Pro Freestyle Tour forks, but this only has a single external brazed on guide. So you essentially have 4 forks to choose from, and I ended up choosing Style 1. GT Epoch, this is a freestyle version, and I had to work on the upper cap. It was in pretty rough shape when I got it, but it came out really nice. One thing I did want to point out is that there are 4 different versions of the GT Epoch, depending on how you want to look at it. And I'm going to be making a video about this subject to go over all of that. But for the most part, just be aware there are a few race versions. There is a few freestyle versions. And of course, there's a mountain bike version. So don't get them confused because some of them are not compatible with the gyro. And of course, this is not a tutorial on how to put the bike together. I'm just going to be going over it and showing you what I do. And of course, you might do things differently, and that's fine. You can leave comments down in the comment section about how you would approach it, which tools you would use. That's fine. Now, we're going to be installing the rest of the gyro here, and just be mindful that you don't want to over tighten this nut because you could end up stripping the threading. So the bottom bracket, I ended up using a new Tioga BB220SB set, and you can get that from Porkchop BMX. Basically, the cups and the bearings are what I used. The rest of the stuff is original GT parts. Also, make sure you use grease in the bottom bracket tube. I use Fill Wood. You can use whatever you want, but make sure you have grease in there for when you're doing it. When you install the bottom bracket cups, just make sure that they are parallel and they're not skewed, and that there's no gap between the cup and the bottom bracket tube. GT Power Series 3-piece cranks. These are 180 millimeter and they're dated 1989 with the A on both of the arms. These were prepped and sanded from 80 grit all the way up to 1200 grit, and then I sent them off to Angelo for chrome plating. Some of you know I was making the GT Power Series spindle bolts for a few years before Porkchop came out with their titanium versions. But I was actually out of my own spindle bolts when I did this project. So Angelo supplied me with a set of my own bolts, which are polished to a mirror finish and look absolutely perfect when mated to these chrome-plated cranks. This is my favorite part of the build. GT 43-tooth wing logo sprocket. Here I took an OG sprocket that was really nice on the backside and had excellent teeth, yet the front of the sprocket was faded and almost had a non-existent logo. Besides that, it was deeply scratched and it was begging for restoration. I removed the rest of the paint with paint thinner and started with 80 grit sandpaper, working my way up to 1000. I also made a special arbor so I could attach it to my drill and spin it, sanding in a circular motion. And a few other tricks here and there to polish the front face, and I added a transfer decal, and yeah, it looks really good. Front brake cable routing. I will leave a link to the video I made showing you my method to perform this task. The GT stem is a 5 Dimple Pro XL version from 1990. It is polished and looking mighty nice. I replaced the original Allen cap screws with the stainless steel versions that are 5/16 18. They're not metric. Don't cross-thread them thinking they're metric. The stem was also modified for the POTS mod using the hollow bolt. If you have a racing stem, you will need to modify the casting by drilling it out, and also the washer. Just be aware of that. GT 4-piece handlebars. These were purchased with the frame set, and they were in pretty bad shape. The chrome was missing in a few spots, but there were no dings or dents in the tubing. I tried using the new GT 4-piece handlebars they currently offer, and there are 3 different versions of these, but even the shortest rise is not the same as the old school 4-piece from the 1990s. I opted then to have them re-chromed, and Angelo handled the business end of getting them off to his chromer. They came out really nice. I'm very happy with them. This chrome is not the same as the old school chrome in my opinion. To me, the new chrome plating looks thicker and glossier. The old school chrome appears thinner and, well, it's hard to describe. Let me know in the comments section what you guys think. Moving on to the rear brake. I decided to use an NOS Odyssey Pitbull in black. I can see why GT started moving away from the Diacomp 990 and started using this type of brake. First things first, it's much easier to dial in. Now, I'm not saying it's better or worse than the 990, so before you start nuking me in the comment section, I'm just personally pleased it didn't take me 15 minutes to set up and get it working. If you're not familiar with the Pitbull brake, it's a rear roller cam brake. There are pros and cons to using it, just like any other brake design. Some cons are the rear pads are fixed straight, but of course you could use a cone washer to adjust the toe. The boomerang or pull plate can wear, causing uneven pull tension, and they are prone to rust. But the pros are, the spring tension is factory preset, so it just needs to be mounted and set up. And once dialed in, this brake works really well, especially with the pads against chrome-plated rims. GT C-clamp. This is restored and was re-chrome plated. Angelo handled this task for me using his chrome plater. The GT logo is a rub-on transfer decal, and this clamp is the correct early 90s version for the PFT, the Aggressor, and the Slammers. Its key features are the opposing Allen cap screws. Gyro cables are Odyssey, and on the lower gyro cable, I recommend you leave some extra length and do not make this cable taut. Make sure you install the cable clamp on the top tube of the frame last once everything is set up and you have the rear brake connected and dialed in. This will make things much easier when you try to align and set all the cables into their adjusters. If you plan on riding the bike, use caution on which type of cable cutters you use. I recommend Park Tool cable cutter part number CN-10, or my go-to, which are my Knipex mini bolt cutters. I really like those. Use a dab of light oil on the cable when you install it in the conduit. This will help reduce friction and make those brakes just a little better overall. But just be careful you don't get it on the carpet. And if you're building a Carpet Queen, you don't need to do this. Setting up the Odyssey Pitbull is pretty straightforward, and the instructions on the rear of the box are very intuitive. Just be aware that many of the adjustment wheels happen to break off, and even in this NOS version, the adjuster wheel is completely missing. I ordered a replacement, and they are still available, and I'll be repairing this brake off camera. Here we have an NOS Viscount 2188 seat, but it is not GT. However, it is in the GT family. This happens to be a Powerlight seat that I modified into a GT 2188. There's no way I'm paying ridiculous amounts of money for a GT logo seat in mint condition, knowing that Porkchop BMX is going to have these seats available at some point in the future, like he did with the 2123.
Really?
GT seat post is from an 88 PFT, and it's a Survivor with original chrome plate. And you can see the circle stamp logo. And I am applying a little bit of fill wood grease to the bottom of the tube where it will be sitting in the seat mast. This is to prevent it from locking up. Notice I did not apply grease to where the seat clamp will be, and I am building a Carpet Queen, so I'm not really concerned about the seat post moving a little bit, more concerned with it locking up and freezing. Grips for the Aggressors are unique to 1990, and they were GT flanged anatomical, of course made by Amy. They were used on the mountain bikes, believe it or not, and they found their way onto the Aggressor lineup. They can still be found in white in NOS form, but black are very hard to get for some reason. Somebody is hoarding them. I was going to dye the grips black, and I'll be making a video about that in the future, and I was running out of time for this build, so I decided to use these Amy flanged grips instead. Let me know in the comments if you've been successful dyeing your grips black. In case you're wondering, I'm using rubbing alcohol. You can also use Windex to install the grips. They both evaporate fairly quickly, and they do not leave throttle grip. Just enough time for you to get them in the proper position. Same for removal if you're trying to get them off. Now, I know some people use compressed air, but not everybody has access to it. Brake levers are Tech 7 bodies in original black finish with polished levers. The levers are from Tech 7 units, and I decided at the last minute to ditch these in favor of another set of Tech 7s I have with real 182 levers. The reason for this is the locking mechanism doesn't work correctly when you use Tech 7 triggers on a Tech 7 body. You would have to modify them to get them to work with the pin trigger. However, I wanted to share a tip for rebuilding your Tech 7 levers. I find there can be play on the triggers, and more space between the 182 lever and the body means more clearance and slop. If you find this to be the case, you can install small brass shim washers, about 1,000 to 2,000ths of an inch in thickness, each with the plastic bushing. This takes up the clearance and tightens up that trigger. Use part number Z9801-BR and or Z9802-BR. I used to buy these from McMaster Car, but they're not showing up anymore on their website, so you'll have to Google search it and check around. Upper gyro cables are going on here. Now, I set the adjusters at the upper gyro plate to their max limit, meaning fully exposed, and the adjuster at the splitter so no threads are exposed, meaning no adjustment. Now, the real purpose of how I'm building the bike here without a stand or a frame clamp is to show you that you do not need, by any means, a bike stand or expensive mount. While they do help, and I have one mounted on my garage wall, this is not required. This entire build was done on this carpet. With the front brake cable in position, I will apply some light oil to the cable and fish it through the brake caliper. Now, if you're building a Carpet Queen, you don't need to do this. If you're building a rider, you do need to do this. I like to run my cables behind the handlebars. Some of you run them through the bars and through the front. It's personal choice. You do whatever you want. It's your build. The Diacomp 883 Nippon is original finish and was sanded and polished. I took care of that. I modified this 883. Well, technically this is an 882L. And I made a whole video on that subject, which I'll link up here so you can check that out. But anyway, I incorporated metric ball bearings from RC cars into the arms. First drilling and then using an M mill to create the counterbore. I then put Loctite 609 on the OD of the bearings and pressed them into the arms. This really wakes this brake up. The pull is even and there's no flex at all. The true 883s used an Allen head 7mm shoulder bolt, while the 882Ls used a 6mm pivot bolt. And there's a lot of clearance between that 6mm pivot bolt and the through hole in the arm, about 7 thousandths per side. And yes, you can do this on a new 883 brake from Porkchop BMX, in case you were wondering. Again, front wheel is Haro Lineage 36-spoke chrome-plated hoops, laced to Generation 1 Superlace polished hubs. The GT pegs here are the spiked versions from the late 80s and into the 90s. These are restored with powder coat by C4 and a transfer decal. They come out really nice. Final setup on the 883 Nippon, and I'm using GT Cool Stop brake pads. These pads work well with the chrome finish. Another tip is to run the front brake cable through the fork stander clamp to keep it secure and out of the way of the wheel. Some people run this cable on the inside of the fork, between the wheel and the fork tube, and others run it on the outside of the fork. This is really personal choice, that's all. Freewheel is Suntour 16 tooth. It's a survivor, but it's in mint condition. Believe me, when you're putting the freewheel on, you don't need to tighten this up with a tool. It will tighten itself. Okay, we're going to throw the rear wheel on and get everything lined up straight with the brake pads and move on to the chain. Izumi 1/8 chain. This is brand new, black on nickel. Pedals, I just got finished up and I had two options. In fact, what you see in the video are Welgo. But both pedals were VP 820 GT platform pedals in 9/16, of course with the pressed in pins. I had one chrome plated and the other done in black powder coat by Ernie's 80s. The chrome plate was handled by Angelo's plater and they came out amazing, but the prep work is laborious, just giving you a heads up. Repop dust caps with the bubble font logo were 3D printed by Edgar Bass, and if you are interested, you can find him on Facebook. The original reflectors and of course new grease, all packed and spins all day. I mounted one of each pedal and decided to use the chrome plate pedals over the black powder coat. It just looks better to me. Remember, my bike, my choice. Final dial in on the Pitbull brake. Remember, you want more pull travel on your gyro. This was shown in a freestyle mag from the 80s and also mentioned by Eddie Fiola in an interview where he stated that this is how Brian Skura intended it to be run, with the detangler almost touching the tabs on the lower cup. Now, when I'm building a Carpet Queen, I kind of have this centered, but if I'm building a rider, I usually do it this way. It gives you a lot more pull travel.
Set your gyro up so it's not floating. It actually rests on those little ear tabs on the frame. And then you adjust the top so that you have enough braking pull, so it pulls high enough up without bottoming out.
Fork standers are NOS, chrome-plated Generation 2. And here I'm using Dennis Gonzalez's frame and fork protectors, aka Mad Paint protectors. These are special cutout adhesive back pads that are mounted to the fork and frame standers to protect the paint and finishes from being damaged. So if you're interested in these, hit Dennis up. He's on Facebook and the BMX Museum. The rear pegs are GT steel tube rides from the late 80s, and I had them re-chromed, plus a late addition, some black powdered whale tails. I have mixed opinions on frame and fork standers. I've never used them back in the day. They just got in the way. I rode with pegs, mainly GT tube rides, and part of the reason why I think there's so many of these fork and frame standers for sale are people are just unloading them after finding them in storage bins or in their attic after all these years. Let me know if you rode with fork and frame standers back in the day. That brings us to the end of the video. I hope you liked it and maybe learned something new or interesting. This is my first Aggressor build, and I loved gathering the parts and putting it all together, making deadlines, hunting for the parts, and making new friends along the way. So let me know what you think of the build, what you would have done differently, or not. If you're a member of the BMX Museum, please get out there and vote in the freestyle class. The voting thread opens October 16th and closes on Halloween. My build is under A-Trains89. Remember to subscribe, hit that like button, set yourself up for notifications. I have a lot of videos in the works. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and remember, tomorrow is not guaranteed.